Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Big Questions, Small Steps. My name is Amanda and I'm so glad that you could join me today. So we've been talking about the New Testament scripture passages that I grew up with in Christianity, that I grew up teaching in Sunday school, that I grew up teaching in confirmation class, and how my understanding has changed because of it. Today's video is a big one. Today's video is one that a lot of Christians hang a great deal of importance on. In today's video, we are talking about not one, not two, but 9 different passages. But I put them all together because they're all about the miracles that Jesus did. You got it. We are talking about the miracles of Jesus in today's passage. So let's hit that intro and we'll dive right in. So growing up in Christianity, the stories of the miracles of Jesus were kind of awe-inspiring. That God and Jesus loved us so much that he did these amazing things. And how special are we as followers of Jesus that we can witness and understand these great things that Jesus is doing. That was the whole premise growing up when you look at the miracles and when we were learning about the miracles. Each time that Jesus did a miracle, it just re-emphasized the idea of how important he is, how any person can't even compare to how amazing he is because he can do these different things. So in today's video, we're going to look at 9 different miracle stories, and there's more than 9, but we're going to look at the 9 main ones. Important things to note about these miracle stories is that they're very frequently in more than one book of the Bible. So I'm going to read all the different versions for the first one, and I'll give you where you can find the other stories, but I don't want this video to take your entire day, so I'm not going to read you all the different variations. Just know that the different variations have variations for a reason, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But our plan is we're going to read each of the miracle stories, and we'll talk a little bit about how I taught the kids about this story when I was teaching Sunday school, how I explained this story when I was teaching confirmation. And then I'm also going to share, as I have more knowledge now, what do I struggle with those stories? Okay, and then at the end I'll wrap it all up. But let's get started without any more delays because we've got a lot of work to do today. We're going to be reading the stories from the Good News Bible. That's the version that I have at my house, and it's the Today's English version. This is the Bible that I actually received when I started learning about the Bible. Okay, so our first story today, and actually all of our stories, are found in the Gospels. The Gospels are the first 4 books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Again, many Christians think that those 4 books were actually written by a person named Matthew, a person named Mark, a person named Luke, and a person named John. That's not the case. The book authors for each of those books is actually anonymous. We don't know who wrote them, but we do know that a man named Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament. So just keep that in mind. All of the miracle stories are in the Gospels. They're all in there. The first story that we're going to look at is from the book of Matthew. And as I go through the different miracle stories, I want to let you know that I didn't just randomly put them in order. What I did was I took the most common version of the parable, and I just plotted it so we are essentially walking through the New Testament so we can see all the different parables. So if you have a Bible at home and you want to pull it up and read what you said in your Bible, how yours reads, you can see the differences. And there's going to be differences between the different versions. There are. So we're starting at the book of Matthew, chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. This story is known as Jesus calms the sea, or calming of the sea, or Jesus calms the water, something like that. And as I stated before, this story, like most of the miracle stories, can be found in other places. After you finish, we're going to read the version from Matthew, but if you want to look at the other versions, which we will, it's going to be in Mark and Luke. I'm not going to give you the verses yet, because we're going to actually look at the 3 different versions for the first miracle story, okay? So we're going to read from Matthew first. It's Matthew 8, again, verses 23 through 27. Okay, here we go. Jesus got into a boat, and his disciples went with him. Suddenly, a fierce storm hit the lake, and the boat was in danger of sinking. But Jesus was asleep. The disciples went to him and woke him up. "Save us, Lord," they called. "We are about to die." "Why are you so frightened?" Jesus answered. "What little faith you have." Then he got up and ordered the winds and the waves to stop, and there was a great calm. Everyone was amazed. "What kind of man is this?" they said. "Even the winds and waves obey him." Okay, so let's jump to the book of Mark. We're looking at Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. Okay, this is Mark's version. Here we go. It's called Jesus Calms the Storm. On the evening of that same day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they left the crowd. The disciples got into a boat in which Jesus was already sitting, and they took him with them. Other boats were there too. Suddenly, a strong wind blew up, and the waves began to spill over into the boat, so that it was about to fill with water. Jesus was in the back of the boat, sleeping with his head on a pillow. The disciples woke him up and said, "Teacher, don't you care that we're about to die?" Jesus stood up and commanded the winds, "Be quiet." And he said to the waves, "Be still." The wind died down, and there was a great calm. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Why are you frightened? Do you still have no faith?" But they were terribly afraid and began to say to one another, "Who is this man? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Okay, so you can see some similarities, but some differences as well. Let's jump to the last version of this story in the Gospels. We're flipping to the book of Luke. Luke, we're looking for chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. This one again is called Jesus Calms the Storm. And here's what Luke says. One day, Jesus got into a boat with his disciples and said to them, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they started out. As they were sailing, Jesus fell asleep. Suddenly, a strong wind blew down on the lake, and the boat began to fill with water. So they were all in great danger. The disciples went to Jesus and woke him up, saying, "Master, Master, we are about to die." Jesus got up and gave an order to the wind and to the stormy water. They quieted down, and there was a great calm. Then he said to the disciples, "Where is your faith?" But they were amazed and afraid and said to one another, "Who is this man? He gives orders to the winds and waters, and they obey him." So in each of those 3 versions, you have Jesus and a boat and a storm, okay? Now, when we would teach this story to the kids, we talked about how God is all powerful and in control of everything. And Jesus, as God's son, he has some of those quote unquote powers. Okay, so we would play red light, green light, or things like that, where you can pretend to be the one with all the powers or all the control. And the kids enjoyed it because they got to control everybody else. Now, as I grew in my faith and as I learned more, I struggled with this story. Not only because in the 3 versions, it's all slightly different. So what did the disciples actually say? Did they call him master? Did they call him teacher? Did they call him Lord? Okay. What actually happened? Did Jesus give an order? What was the order? Why were they in the boat? Why was Jesus sitting in a boat and everybody is just like, oh, okay, that's where we're going, I guess. We're going in that boat with that guy. It just seems a little bit like a magic show to me. Like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I have problems with it. The whole concept to me of somebody being able to stand up and stop a storm, it can't happen. If you have a tornado coming towards your house and you go outside and say, stop, by the name of God, stop, that tornado's not going to disappear. If you do that to a rainstorm, it's not going to disappear. It does not work like that. But in this story, they needed Jesus to be the savior, to prove that if you just have faith in him and in his powers and in his abilities, you can do anything. And the part that always kind of irked me in particular, the disciples, his friends, were in this boat. They thought they were going to die. Jesus is sleeping, okay? Jesus wakes up and he's like, psh, got this. And he stops the storm. And then instead of just being like, okay, don't worry, guys, I got you. No, he starts to chastise them and say, where is your faith? Why don't you believe in me? You were sleeping, dude. Why would they believe in you if you were sleeping? It doesn't make sense to me logically. It does not correlate. I can't make it fit. Okay? So that's the first miracle in the New Testament. Okay? Now, like I said, all the miracles are typically written in more than one book of the Bible. I'm not going to read every single version for all the other ones because that's a really long time. Okay? I'm going to certainly give you the Bible verses and everything so you can look them up if you'd like. But I'm not going to waste your time by reading every single version of every single story. That seems like it's a bit monotonous. And if you wanted me to have a story time, well, I have a different channel for that. And it's called Snuggles and Storytime, and you can listen to me read stories there. Sorry about that. My context kept shifting, so we're going to just go old school and put our glasses back on for the next one. So the next chapter, the next story that we're going to explore actually is called Jesus Feeds 5,000 Men. And just like in the other story, this is written in multiple different books. And so we're going to be looking at the version from Matthew. We're looking at Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21. I'm not going to read all the different versions of this story, just like I'm not going to read all the versions of the rest of them, because I don't want to take your entire day. I am, however, going to tell you all of the different Bible verses of the story. So if you want to look them up on your own time, you certainly can. Okay, so Jesus Feeds the 5,000 is found in actually all of the books of the Gospels. So in Mark, you're looking at Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 44. In Luke, you have chapter 9, verses 10 through 17. And in John, you have chapter 6, verses 10 through 14. Okay? And again, we're going to be doing the Matthew version because that's the more common one. Matthew 14, verses 13 through 21. Ready? Here we go. When Jesus heard the news about John, he left there in a boat and went to a lonely place by himself. The people heard about it, and so they left their towns and followed him by land. Jesus got out of the boat, and when he saw the large crowd, his heart was filled with pity for them, and he healed their sick. That evening, his disciples came to him and said, "It is already very late, and this is a lonely place. Send the people away, and let them go to the village to buy their food for themselves." "They don't have to leave," answered Jesus. "You yourselves, give them something to eat." "All we have here are 5 loaves and 2 fish," they replied. "Then bring them here to me," Jesus said. He ordered the people to sit down on the grass. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He looked up to heaven and gave thanks to God. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. Everyone ate and had enough. Then the disciples took 12 baskets full of what was left over. The number of men who ate was about 5,000, not counting the women and children. So in this story, we talk about sharing, and we try to talk about multiplying, which is really tough if you're working with 5-year-olds. But basically, we talk about how if everyone has a little bit, you are more satisfied and everyone can be fed as long as we're not being greedy. Okay, now in this story, there are some different versions, like I said. There are some where the disciples are the ones that bring the food, and there are others that the people in the crowd actually offered their food, and that's how they were blessed. And there's also a change in the time of the story. Some say it's at night. Some say it's a midday meal. It's different. There's inconsistencies, and that only adds to my concern, my frustration with the Bible is there's so many inconsistencies, and that bothers me. Why the inconsistencies? If you are documenting what happened, how can the food have come from different sources? How can the time of day be different? I don't get it. This story in particular reminds me of a book that I read when I was still in Christianity but having a lot of struggles. And essentially it was the story of these prison inmates, and they were passing around this pack of gum. And it was like never ending, and there's all these gum for all these inmates. It never runs out, even though it's like a five stick juicy fruit package or whatever. At the end of the story, it basically goes, the one inmate was executed, and he had just a whole slew of gum in his possession. So this story again is just supposed to, well, if you have faith and you believe that this is going to be enough and you will be provided for, then you're just supposed to go with it. Now, at the beginning of the story, when it said Jesus, when he heard about John, then he went to go by himself. The John that they're talking about is John the Baptist, and he had just died. John the Baptist and Jesus were really good friends. They grew up together. There was a lot of camaraderie there. So to hear about one of your very good friends passing away certainly would upset someone. But Jesus, being Jesus, according to the New Testament, he just has this flock of people follow him. And he basically is like, okay, so you want a show, so I'll give you a show. And his disciples kind of egg him on. And of course, they're like, well, Come here, come on, they're here to do something. You got to tell them what to do and teach and preach, and we want to build this gathering that we have. That's not human nature. Now, Christians would say, but Jesus isn't human, he's God's son, so he doesn't have the same emotions as us. B, that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Now, again, I am a human, and perhaps I'm not meant to understand all of Jesus. But the idea that there were so many people there and they had food, but they refused to share, so they're going to feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And when they're done, apparently they have like 12 baskets full of food after everyone has eaten. The math just ain't mathin' on that one. I get that they call it a miracle because you can't explain it. But then again, Christians use miracles to show the power of Jesus. That Jesus is more than a man. He is God-like. He is God on earth. He is supposed to do all these great things to prove that he's better than everybody else. Okay? So that's the second story. Let's take a look at the third one. The third one is called Walk on Water, or Jesus Walks on Water. This again is in multiple different books. We're going to read the version from Matthew. We're going to read Matthew 14, verses 22 through 33. But it can also be found in Mark chapter 6, verses 45 through 52. And John chapter 6, verses 16 through 21, okay? But we're in Matthew. It actually comes right after the story that we just read about Jesus feeding the 5,000 men. We've got Jesus walks on water. So let's dive in. Then Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people away. So they were on the hill. Jesus fed them all. It's time. It's nighttime. Jesus turns to his friends and says, okay, you guys head out. I'm going to make everybody leave. Okay? Just hold on. We'll come back to it. Now, after sending the people away, he went up a hill by himself to pray. When evening came, Jesus was there alone. Again, you've got a timeline thing. It was the same day, it's evening, but the last verse just said that they were feeding them at evening. So, yep, we'll come back to it. When evening came, Jesus was there alone. And by this time, the boat was far out in the lake, tossed about by the waves, because the wind was blowing against it. Between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came to the disciples, walking on the water. When they saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. "It's a ghost!" they said, and screamed with fear. Jesus spoke to them at once. "Courage," he said. "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then Peter spoke up. "Lord, if it is really you, order me to come out on the water to you." "Come," answered Jesus. So Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water to Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he was afraid and started to sink down into the water. "Save me, Lord," he cried. At once Jesus reached out and grabbed a hold of him and said, "What little faith you have! Why did you doubt?" They both got into the boat, and the wind died down. Then the disciples in the boat worshiped Jesus. "Truly you are the Son of God," they exclaimed. Yeah. Let's start with what I taught the kids. Okay. So when when I was teaching this story, I would teach them about how when you're scared, you can't do as much, when you just have to be brave and you have to trust yourself and know what you can do and have faith in what you're supposed to do. Okay, so we talked about we would have people blindfolded, and if you just listen for the voice and just follow the voice, then you'll be safe. You were supposed to walk this maze. If you got distracted and you started listening to all the other sounds, then you could bump into something. And how we're supposed to be hyper focused on Jesus and following Jesus's voice and Jesus's lead. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we taught them. Okay. Now, knowing more, I am not proud of the fact that I taught that. I have major concerns. The idea that a man was walking on water is physically impossible. Backing the story up, the timeline doesn't make sense. Why, if it's nighttime, would Jesus then go up to a mountain, pray all by himself, and then the next morning come out onto the lake? What kind of friends did he have that when he said, go in a boat and go across, like they left him? They left him. And they were halfway through. Nobody stayed with him when he was praying or doing whatever. It just seems a bit trippy to me. It makes me wonder if there weren't dreams that's going on, doubts in themselves that all of a sudden they need Jesus to come in and save them, that they can do the same thing that he does with their power, with his powers, if they just believe. That's the part that through my time in Christianity, that's what I struggled with. If I didn't understand, they would always come back, they being my pastors, people that I looked up to in the church, people that I went to with questions, they would come back to me and say, you just don't have strong enough faith. If you pray more, if you believe more with your heart, if you just accept Jesus into your life fully and completely, then it'll all make sense to you. So because I had questions, they were questioning my faith and my trust, just like Jesus did to the disciples. Every time Peter got scared, he's walking on water. There is not a person that can do that unless water is in its solid form when it's known as ice. And even then, many officials will tell you that no ice is safe ice to walk on. Why would you chastise someone who's trying their best and they get nervous and they reach out to you for help because that's what they've been taught to do? And then you're going to start criticizing them and saying, oh, you just don't have enough faith. Like, where is your faith? Why do you doubt so much? That's a crummy thing to do. Let's just admit that. Jesus was kind of crummy to his disciples sometimes. They're trying to be the best people they can be. And you're continually pointing out where they're falling short, how they're not measuring up to your expectations. That's crummy. You're not encouraging them. You're just tearing them down. And I don't care for that. I don't like bullies, me personally. Okay, moving on. Let's end that tangent for right now. The next story that we're going to look at is still in the book of Matthew. And in this story, Jesus is healing some people who are blind. Okay, so this is in the book of Matthew. We're at chapter 20, verses 29 through 34. And again, just like many of the other stories, this is listed in more than one book of the Gospels. So if you wanted, you could check out Mark chapter 10, verses 46 through 52, or Luke chapter 18, verses 35 through 40. Okay, These are all the different stories. We're going to look at the Matthew version. Matthew 20, verses 29 through 34. Ready? It's called Jesus Heals Two Blind Men. Okay. As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd was following. Two blind men who were sitting by the road heard that Jesus was passing by. So they began to shout, "Son of David, have mercy on us, sir." The crowd scolded them and told them to be quiet. But they shouted even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on us, sir." Jesus stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked them. "Sir," they answered, "we want you to give us our sight." Jesus had pity on them and touched their eyes, and at once they were able to see, and they followed him. Now, in the other versions, sometimes they would say that the eyes were scaled over, and when Jesus touched it, the scales fell off. Some will say that they are shouting different things. When we were teaching this story, it was tough because, as you may notice, I wear glasses. And I can pray all day and all night, but I won't be able to see as clearly without my glasses. And that was supposed to kind of bring home the fact that I'm not Jesus. I'm nowhere close to Jesus. I'm not worthy enough to be the daughter of God. Only Jesus is. Jesus is the Son of God. That's it. So when we were teaching the kids, we would talk about how we have limitations. I have glasses. Somebody else may use walking devices, walking aids. Someone may not very well be a good drawer. Some people might not be able to sing. So they were talking about their limitations. And if we just ask God, if we just be more like Jesus, he will use our limitations for good. Okay, so I would tell the kids, I have glasses, and that's okay. Because me being around and doing what I can do with glasses on helps other people see that there are people who wear glasses all the time and they're good people and they do these good things, and it's just a good connection point. It helps them see that God uses everybody, not just people who are perfect, because he's talking about limitations. Now, I have a bit of a medical background, and so the idea of putting your hands on someone's eyes and them magically being able to see is a crock. It doesn't happen. It's supposed to be a magical thing that only Jesus can do. Medically, it doesn't happen like that. You can put pressure on a wound and you can make it stop bleeding. You can squint your eyes and you can be able to see more clearly sometimes if you don't have glasses. But putting your hands on somebody's eyes doesn't make someone who's blind see more. Just like putting your hands on someone's leg that is not able to walk will make them be able to walk again. That it doesn't happen like that. But the thought is that if you just believe in the power of Jesus, that Jesus will be able to come in and make everything right. He's able to do things you couldn't even contemplate because he's Jesus. He's the Son of God. And again, by doing all these miracles, it's elevating him in the minds of most Christians because he can do things the rest of humanity can't. It's proving time and time again how he must be something special because not everybody can do that. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next story that we're still in the book of Matthew. This one is known as the wedding feast. Okay? And we're reading the Matthew version. It's Matthew 22, verses 1 through 14. This story is also found in Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 24. Now this one, we're again going to read both passages, and we're going to look to see at the similarities and differences and then talk about our problems, okay? But let's start with Matthew. Matthew 22, verses 1 through 14. Ready? Here we go. Jesus again used parables in talking to the people. The kingdom of heaven is like this. Once there was a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son. He sent his servants to tell the invited guests to come to a feast, but they did not want to come. So he sent another servant with his messenger for the guests. My feast is now ready. My steers and my prized calves have been butchered and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But the invited guests paid no attention and went about their business. One went to his farm, another to his store, while others grabbed the servants and beat them and killed them. The king was very angry, so he sent soldiers who killed those murderers and burned their cities down. Then he called his servants and said to them, My wedding feast is ready, but the people I invited did not deserve it. Now go to the main streets and invite to the feast as many people as you find. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, good and bad alike. And the wedding hall was filled with people. The king went in to look at the guests, and he saw the man who was not wearing wedding clothes. Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes? The king asked him. But the man said nothing. Then the king told the servants, Tie him up hand and foot and throw him outside in the dark. There he will cry and gnash his teeth. And Jesus concluded, Many are invited, but few are chosen. Now, that's a tricky one because it's talking about a wedding, but it's missing a portion. It's missing a portion. He sent his servants to go and tell people, and when they didn't listen, he went and killed them and burned their cities down. It's a bit extreme, don't you think? Let's take a look at the other version, which is in Luke 14. So let's find it. Luke 14. And we are at 15 through 24. Luke 14, 15 through 24. Okay. Okay, the next miracle story that we're going to talk about is when Jesus raises somebody from the dead. In particular, it's Simon Peter, one of his friend's wife's mom, so his mother-in-law. So Jesus raises his friend's mother-in-law. Okay, so we are in the book of Mark now, Mark chapter 1, verses 29 through 39. But this story can also be found in Matthew chapter 8, verses 14 through 27, and Luke chapter 4, verses 38 through 41. But again, we're reading the Mark version. So Mark 29, and it's called Jesus Heals Many People. Okay? Jesus and his disciples, including James and John, left the synagogue and went straight to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was sick in bed with a fever, and as soon as Jesus arrived, he was told about her. He went to her, took her by the hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. After the sun had set and evening had come, people brought to Jesus all the sick and those who had demons. All the people of the town gathered in front of the house. Jesus healed many who were sick with all kinds of diseases and drove out many demons. He would not let the demons say anything because they knew who he was. Okay, so Again, you're supposed to believe that because Jesus is the Son of God, that he can do these magical things. She had a fever. Okay, I don't know about you. I'm not the best patient. But when you have a fever, you can still do things. And she's a mom. And not only a mom, she's also a son-in-law. And she likely had great respect for Jesus. So if the president came to your house, for example, and you happened to have a headache or you happened to have a fever and you were laying in bed and they came and said, "Hey, I hear you're not feeling well. Can you make me a cup of tea or can you make me whatever?" Wouldn't you try to get up out of bed? Moms push through a lot when they're sick. That story, to me, we've never taught it to the Sunday school kids because they don't have a concept of the suffering of others necessarily and how it will connect to them. They don't realize that moms and dads get sick and how them banging on their toys might be a bother to them. They might think they're trying to help. So we didn't teach that story to the kids. But the premise of that miracle story just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And quite honestly, I feel like it's kind of rude of Jesus to have come to his friend's house and went to see his mother-in-law, and I don't know, maybe he was just trying to say hi or something, but she got up and started waiting on them. Again, if he was a good person, wouldn't he have told her to just go rest? Did he really need fresh bread at that moment? Was there no one else around who could have helped him with that? Could he not have poured his own water? He doesn't seem like a good friend in that moment. He doesn't seem like a good leader in that moment. He doesn't seem like a good person in that moment. I don't care for that. I don't care for that. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is also in the book of Mark. Now we're looking at Mark 2, verses 1 through 12. And this is a story that I really enjoyed teaching. This is a story called Jesus Heals a Paralyzed Man. And I typically enjoyed teaching these stories when we would help the kids see how they can overcome their shortcomings. Okay, so in this one it was paralyzed man. So I did a lot with disabilities in my class. So I did an experience where they practiced being blind, or experience where they practiced they couldn't use their legs, or they couldn't talk, or they couldn't hear, just to help understand and broaden them and their awareness of others and what they may be struggling with. Okay, so here's the story. Jesus heals a paralyzed man. Again, we're in the book of Mark, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. A few days later, Jesus went back to Capernaum, and the news spread that he was at home. So many people came together that there was no room left, not even out the front door. Jesus was preaching the message to them. Then 4 men arrived, carrying a paralyzed man to Jesus. Because the crowd, however, they couldn't get the man to him. So they made a hole in the roof right above the place where Jesus was. When they made an opening, they let the man down, lying on his mat. See how much faith he had. Jesus saw the paralyzed man and said, "My son, your sins are forgiven." Some teachers of the law who were sitting there thought to themselves, "How does he dare talk like this? This is blasphemy. God is the only one who can forgive sins." At once, Jesus knew what they were thinking. So he said to them, "Why do you think such things? Is it easier to say that this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, pick up your mat, and walk? I will prove to you then that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So, he said to the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, pick up your mat, and go home. While they all watched, the man got up, picked up his mat, and hurried away. They were all completely amazed and praised God, saying, we have never seen anything like this. So, in this story, I remember the kids thinking it was great. You might have remembered growing up, if you were laying in a blanket, they might swing you. To have two people on each end, they would swing you. So we would do that with kids. We would swing them back and forth, and then we would raise them really, really high up that they were going on the roof, and then we would slowly lower them down. And the kids thought it was amazing. They thought it was great. That's the part I enjoyed about teaching the story. The facts of the story I struggle with. Again, there's so many people around that love the tenacity of the friends, that they wanted so badly to help their friend that they decided, okay, if you believe in Jesus, we're going to climb on the roof, we're going to make a hole, we're going to get you down and see Jesus. I love that their friends were there for each other. I don't love the fact that, again, he's called the Son of God. I believe that's what he was referred to as. The Son of Man, the Son of Man. So they're giving him that title again. I don't agree with that title, me personally. And that he's just magically healed. If you happen to be an individual who is paralyzed, how messed up is it to believe that because you didn't have enough faith, or because you didn't believe hard enough, that's why you're paralyzed. It's because of your sins. You did something wrong. That's why you're paralyzed. Not because, your back was broken or the nerve endings didn't connect the right way or whatever. Or you have muscle wasting disease and your legs physically cannot support you. Or you have an amputation and your leg was never fully formed or whatever. No, it's not that. It's not the physical stuff. It's you. You had such sin that you can't overcome this problem. I despise the fact that they keep on putting the blame on the individual. If you just had more faith, if you just believed, then you could do this. If you just trusted in Jesus, then you could do this. Okay, so the man got up and walked. First of all, I don't really believe it. Me personally, I'm a skeptic, whatever you want to call me. I don't believe it happened, but it seems very dog and pony show to me. It reminds me of certain faith practices where they'll play with deadly snakes. Okay, if you do the research, they are able to play with these deadly snakes because the snakes are so dehydrated and they're so deprived of food and they're unable to move that they're near dead. They're near dead. If someone is near death, they're not going to have the energy to do anything. There are all these different things that they're doing, and it's just a facade. They're pretending. And I don't like people being fake. Now that I know more and I understand more, I'm not going to sit by and let people just continue to be manipulated like that. It's not okay. It's not okay. But I'm going on a tangent again. I apologize. Let's keep going. Our next story is in the book of Mark. And this is a long one. This is a story of Bartimaeus. We're going to read the story from Mark chapter 10, verses 46 through 52. But this story is also found in Matthew chapter 20, verses 29 through 34, and Luke chapter 18, verses 35 through 43. We're going to read about Bartimaeus. Okay, Bartimaeus again was a person who was blind. So let's go ahead and read this story. Jesus heals blind Bartimaeus. They came to Jericho, and as Jesus was leaving with his disciples and a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began shouting, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Sound like the other story of Jesus healing two blind men? Me too. Many of the people scolded him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted even more loudly, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they say. "Get up, he's calling you." So he threw off his cloak, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. "Teacher," the blind man answered, "I want to see again." "Go," Jesus told him. "Your faith has made you well." At once he was able to see and followed Jesus on the road. So, lots of similarities between that story and Jesus healing the two blind men. This time he's just given a name, and you're given a little bit of his lineage, knowing that he's the son of Timaeus. Do I believe it? No. So if you have a blind man on the side of the road and you have people coming to him and say, "Go, he's calling you," and he just magically runs all the way to Jesus without falling, without hitting other people, he's going to make it all the way to Jesus. Jesus is going to say, "Oh, you're healed. Your faith has healed you." Baloney. Baloney. There's no way that your eyes can do that. There's just no way. It doesn't make any sense. But because Jesus claims that Bartimaeus' faith was so strong, he was pure in heart, he had such strong faith in Jesus, he was magically healed. It was a miracle. And because he had that miracle happen to him, of course he would be a follower. Because what would the story be if he was the recipient of this great gift and then he went back to his home and he started a business? It wouldn't have the same effect. In the miracle stories, typically if he cures somebody, if he heals somebody, whatever, that just adds to the crowd of followers for Jesus. Every miracle that he performed, it was supposed to re-energize them and reconnect them and really solidify the idea that he is the Son of Man. He is better than everybody else. He is who you can't even imagine you could be. He is just one small bit of God, but he's God on earth. So he's special. I think the story is a bunch of crock. Me personally. But let's keep going because I have a feeling you're getting a little bored, or a little tired, I should say, of listening to me ramble on and on and on. I've got two more miracle stories to share with you. So the next one is about when Jesus turned water into wine. Okay? It's called the wedding at Cana, and this is found in the book of John. We are in chapter 2, verses 1. Oops, just want to make sure it's not continuing on the next page. Yep. 1 through 12. The wedding in Cana. 2 days later, there was a wedding in the town of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the wedding. When the wine was given out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They're out of wine. You must not tell me what to do." Jesus replied, "My time has not come yet." Jesus' mother then told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." The Jews have rules about ritual washing, and for this purpose, 6 stone water jugs were there. each one large enough to hold between 20 and 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill these jars with water. Fill them to the brim." And then he told them, "Now draw some water out and take it to the man in charge of the feast." They took him the water, which had now turned into wine, and he tasted it. He did not know where this wine had come from, but of course the servants who had drawn out the water knew. So he called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone else serves the best wedding first, and after the guests have drunk a lot, he serves the ordinary wine, but you have kept the best wine until now." Jesus performed this first miracle in Cana in Galilee. There he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, Jesus and his mothers, brothers, and disciples went to Capernaum and stayed there for a few days. Okay, so this story again, when we're teaching it to the kids, we talk about sharing and how if we share, everyone has more than enough. And if you don't share, you're going to run out and people won't have enough. Am I the only one that when you read this story now, you can picture the meddling mother and being like, hey, you can do this? Like if there's a doctor on an airplane, they say, "Is there a doctor on board? Please let a flight attendant know." The doctors typically aren't like eager to join their services, but somebody will out them. Is there a doctor in the building? Oh yeah, he's a doctor, or no, she's a nurse, or whatever that may be. Jesus is saying, don't call attention to me. Don't say anything. Don't do anything. Mom still does what mom still does. Okay. And now the gross part is there are these jugs, and they're talking about that Jews have a ritual washing, and they do. They have things, the Jewish people will wash their hands in a certain way. It's a two-handed cup, and they'll wash their hands, especially before doing blessings. They will also have containers where they'll dunk things in to cleanse them, and yeah, it's called a mikvah. They do that with different things. So to think like it's supposed to be clean water, but in my head, all I can picture are these jugs of dirty water that people have had their hands in, that people have bathed in, that people have done whatever in, and now you're gonna fill them up with more water and it's gonna magically turn to wine. That sounds disgusting to me. It sounds like a horribly bad idea. Like somebody's gonna get sick. Now, growing up, when I was in confirmation class, when we heard this story, we would frequently dismiss the miracle as everybody was just drunk. They didn't know any better. They were drunk. They were having a good time. You could have given them water and they would think it was wine, which is what we thought they did. Maybe they would take mostly water and maybe mix a little bit of wine in it so it would get that coloring. But that's what we thought it was. I never jumped onto this miracle story. It doesn't make sense to me. You have a finite supply. Wine comes from grapes, not from water. It comes from the juice that's inside the grapes. Yes, I can understand that, but nope. You can't magically change one substance into another. You can't put a dog in your car and all of a sudden you have a horse. That doesn't happen. You don't change its substance like that. I don't agree with this miracle. But again, Jesus doing something, and because nobody called him out and he didn't announce himself, it was supposed to make it even more special at that time that he did this, that he wasn't prompted to, nobody told him to do this. He did this on his own accord, and that makes him even more special, is what they say. Okay? Now, we've got one more story to dive into today, and this is a long one. It's the story of Lazarus. Lazarus is a story of a man who dies and comes back to life, and Jesus brings him back to life. It's a big deal. So we're going to take a peek at it. It's called The Death of Lazarus, and it runs from John chapter 11, verse 1, all the way through verse 44. Okay? So this is a long one. This is one of the very few miracle stories where there is not a second record of this. So in all the New Testament, in all those 4 books of the gospel, only one recorded this long, powerful story of this person named Lazarus. I keep saying his name wrong. It's not Lazarus. It's Lazarus. Okay? Here we go. A man named Lazarus, who is living in Bethany, became sick. Bethany was a town where Mary and her sister Martha lived. This Mary was the one who poured the perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. It was her brother, Lazarus, who was sick. The sisters sent Jesus a message. "Lord, your dear friend is sick." When Jesus heard this, he said, "The final result of this sickness will not be the death of Lazarus. This has happened in order to bring glory to God, and it will be the means by which the Son of God will receive glory." Okay, so basically he's calling attention already, like, nope, it's okay, he's not going to die. You're going to have God shown to you, and I'm going to do it. Okay? Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet, when he received the news that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." Okay, so you hear somebody's sick and you're going to stay there for 2 more days. You're not going to just, hightail it out and go and help where you need it. Okay. Moving on. "Teacher," the disciples answered, "just a short time ago, the people there wanted to stone you. And you're planning on going back?" Jesus said, "A day has 12 hours, doesn't it?" No, it doesn't. It has 24 hours. But perhaps in their time, they computed time differently. "So whoever walks in broad daylight does not stumble, for he sees the light of this world. But if he walks during the night, he stumbles because he has no light." Jesus said this and then added, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I will go and wake him." Okay. The disciples answer, "If he is asleep, Lord, he will get well." Jesus meant that Lazarus had died, but they thought he meant natural sleep. So Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, but for your sake, I am glad that I was not with him, so that you will believe. Let us go to him." Thomas, also called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us all go with this teacher, so that we may die with him." So basically they're like, okay, so if you're going to be wrong, we're all going to be wrong together. Let's go. Okay. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had been buried 4 days before. Okay. Again, I have a bit of a medical background. 4 days after death, your body starts decomposing. Your skin is going to slough off. Like, it's a natural process and it will happen. They didn't have embalming back then. You're not going to be in a good state 4 days after you pass. Okay. Continuing on. I missed my page. I'm so sorry. 4 days after his death. Okay. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Judeans had come to see Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother's death. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "If you had been here, Lord, my brother would have not died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask of him. Your brother will rise to life," Jesus told her. "I know," she replied. that he will rise to life on the last day, talking about the judgment day when Christians believe they will come to life and you'll be judged before God and Jesus on whether you were a good or bad person, okay? Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she answered. I do believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. After Martha said this, she went back and called her sister Mary privately. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up and hurried out to meet him. Jesus had not yet arrived in the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. Okay, so just a point of reference. To me, that story seems misallocated. So Jesus is approaching Martha's house. Martha comes out and says hi to him. Martha goes back into her house and tells her sister, hey, Jesus is here, go talk to him. But now all of a sudden Jesus is not at her house. Jesus is back where he met Martha. Like the location keeps changing. I don't understand that. I don't like that. It's not logical. I don't care for that. The people who were in the house with Mary comforting her followed her when they saw her get up and hurry out. They thought that she was going to the grave to weep there. Mary arrived where Jesus was, and as soon as she saw him, she fell at his feet. Lord, she said, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus saw her weeping, and he saw how the people with her were also weeping. His heart was touched, and he was deeply moved. Where have you buried him? He asked them. Come and see, Lord, they answered. Jesus wept. See how much he was loved, the people said. But some of the people said, he gave sight to the blind man, didn't he? Could he not have kept Lazarus from dying? So the people that were there are questioning Jesus and his motives. Okay, we're almost at the end. Deeply moved once more, Jesus went to the tomb, which was a cave with a stone placed at the entrance. Take the stone away, Jesus ordered. Again, medical-wise, I wouldn't suggest that. It is going to be a scent that you are never going to forget. Okay? Martha, the dead man's sister, answered, there will be a bad smell, Lord. He's been buried 4 days. Okay, so you're smart. Jesus said to her, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believed? They took the stone away. Jesus looked up and said, I thank you, Father, that you listened to me. I know that you always listen to me, but I say this for the sake of the people here so that they will believe that you sent me. After he had said this, he called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. He came out, his hands and feet wrapped in grave clothes and with the clothes around his face. Untie him, Jesus told them, and let him go. Okay, this one again, we didn't teach to this great detail for the kids. This ranks right up there with the Easter story as far as trying to help kids understand that just because Jesus can raise from the dead or Jesus can raise other people from the dead doesn't mean that your grandma's coming back. Doesn't mean that your grandpa's coming back. This is a really tough concept for kids to grasp. But this story is supposed to share that there is nothing that can prevent God or Jesus from doing his amazing work. There's nothing that's beyond his control. Okay? Now, the medical side of me knows that if you've been dead 4 days, there is not a way for you to come back alive. There's not. If you have a cardiac arrest and your heart stops beating, if you're dead for 4 hours, you don't get a rhythm back, you're not coming back after 4 hours. That it just doesn't happen. And so to know what happens to the body in the course of decomposing, to think that, okay, he was put in a cave, in a tomb for 4 days and then he's just going to magically walk out and be absolutely fine? No. Either he wasn't dead when you put him in there, and he's probably mighty hungry and thirsty now, or that didn't happen. The timeline of the story doesn't add up. Where different things are happening. Why did he spend 2 days in a location when he was less than 5 miles away from them? If they were his great friends, wouldn't you want to be there? If your mom was in the hospital and she was near death, wouldn't you go and see her? That doesn't make rational sense to me. All of these miracle stories are supposed to put the onus on the greatness of Jesus, that he can do all these different things. He's God-man, he's God on earth. He can do all these things that we cannot do. We're supposed to have awe for him and admiration for all that he can do. And I used to try very hard to be appreciative of all these amazing things that he could do. But as I learned more, first of all, the Messiah, when they come, isn't supposed to do miracles. That's not what they're sent here for. There's specific items that they're supposed to do that we will know that they are the Messiah or the Mashiach. Miracles aren't anywhere on there. And as a matter of fact, if you look in the Old Testament or the Torah or the Hebrew scriptures, whatever you want to call it, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 13, verses 1 through 4, it specifically states that a prophet or an interpreter of dreams may promise a miracle or a wonder in order to lead you to worship and serve gods that you have not worshipped before. Even if his promises come true, do not pay any attention to him. The Lord your God is using him to test you, to see if you love the Lord with all your heart. Follow the Lord and have reverence for him. Obey him. Keep his commands. Worship him and be faithful to him. So basically it's saying in there, it doesn't matter if somebody is doing magic tricks. It doesn't matter if someone is proclaiming to be the Son of Man. God never said that he was sending a Son of Man. He didn't say that. He said the next person would be a prophet Elijah. That's when we will know that the Mashiach is going to be coming. There are things that are supposed to happen that have not happened. Jesus doing miracles is a great show, but that's not what God had happen. Based on that verse from Deuteronomy, it's a show, and it's somebody, some way, somehow trying to deceive and manipulate and lead people astray. We need to see Jesus's acts with the miracles for what they are. They're acts. They're a good show. I don't need a good show. I need God. And he's a distraction, but he's not God. We have to get back to God. So that's the long story of the miracles in the New Testament, just some of them. I highlighted it and I just kind of walked you through them. I hope this video helps you have a little bit more insight, maybe give you some clarity. Maybe it's starting to make you question about some things, which would be awesome. I just want to spur some knowledge. I want you to think for yourself. I want you to decide. You may question Christianity. You may fully embrace Christianity. Whatever you do, I respect you and your decision. I just know that it's not for me anymore. Christianity is not for me. I know too much and I can't make the puzzle pieces fit together anymore. Now, saying all that, if you like today's presentation, please go ahead and like this video and then hit subscribe, because we do have a few more videos coming out for the New Testament. We talk about some of those stories, and we have lots more exciting episodes coming up soon as well. So hit subscribe so that you can get those alerts, and hit like so we know that you appreciate this video. I hope today made you think a little bit, because the more we know, the more we grow. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.